They weren't just rings. They were symbols of blood, loyalty, and death. Forged in secret, engraved with runes older than Christ, worn only by the chosen few, the black-hearted elite of the SS. Each one whispered a vow: to serve Himmler, to serve Hitler, to serve death itself. But when the Reich fell, they vanished. Thousands of these cursed relics, gone. Some say they were buried in ritual. Some say they're still hidden, waiting to be claimed. And some believe they never left. This is the story of the ring that wasn't just worn. It was bound. Bound to blood, bound to murder, bound to a nightmare that didn't end in 1945. Stay with us. What you're about to hear is not legend. It's what history tried to bury. In the early 1930s, as Adolf Hitler rose to power, Heinrich Himmler envisioned his SS not just as an elite guard, but as a kind of new knighthood bound by iron loyalty and arcane tradition. To cultivate this esprit de corps, Himmler sought to create tangible symbols that would set his men apart and instill in them a sense of sacred mission. The SS Honor Ring was born from this vision. Instituted in 1933, the ring was a personal initiative of Himmler to reward outstanding achievement and unwavering loyalty among his SS officers. Its introduction came at a pivotal moment. The SS had just proven its devotion to Hitler during the infamous Night of the Long Knives in 1934, when Himmler's men helped purge the Nazi Party's rivals. In fact, one of the first known honor rings was awarded on June 30th, 1934, the very day of that bloody purge, as if to commemorate the SS's grim service in securing Hitler's regime. Initially, the honor ring was reserved for Himmler's old guard, the veteran SS men who had joined the ranks before Hitler took power and who demonstrated exceptional valor or leadership. These were members with low SS serial numbers, men who had stood by the Nazi movement through its early struggles. To receive the Totenkopf ring was to be recognized as part of an inner sanctum of the SS. Himmler personally approved each award, insisting that he know the name of every man deemed worthy of this distinction. In the beginning, only a few hundred such rings were bestowed, and they went to some of the most trusted and battle-hardened officers in the SS hierarchy. It was as if the wearer of the ring was more than just an officer. He was now a knight of the Nazi Reich, sworn to uphold a dark chivalric code in service of Führer and fatherland. As the SS expanded and World War II loomed,
The fateful hour of 11 has struck, and Britain's final warning to Hitler having been ignored, a state of war once more exists between Great Britain and Germany.
the exclusivity of the honor ring gradually broadened. The organization swelled with new recruits, and to maintain morale and loyalty, the award criteria became less stringent. Before long, an SS officer with 3 years of dedicated service could expect to earn a Totenkopf ring. Graduates of the SS Junker schools, the rigorous officer academies, often received their rings upon commissioning, symbolizing their initiation into the brotherhood. What began as a rare accolade for a select few had by the late 1930s become almost a rite of passage for many in the SS leadership. Even so, the ring never lost its aura of privilege. Each conferment was still treated with solemn reverence behind closed doors. Himmler was careful to maintain the mystique of the honor ring. He forbade any public announcement of its awarding. Unlike an Iron Cross or other military medal that might be listed in a newspaper or worn openly at a parade, the Totenkopf ring was meant to be a private token between an SS man and his Reichsführer. Recipients were ordered to wear it constantly on the ring finger of their left hand, but not to flaunt it outside SS circles. It was a sacred bond, not an item for propaganda or personal aggrandizement. One internal SS directive explicitly described the ring as an outward sign of inner commitment, a mark of loyalty to the Führer's ideology, not a prize for show. In essence, the SS honor ring functioned like a secret handshake cast in silver and bone, a silent symbol binding Himmler's chosen men into an occult brotherhood that outsiders could scarcely comprehend.
Großen Entscheidungskampf zum Kampf gegen den Bolschewismus.
The SS honor ring was small in size, but immense in symbolic weight. Crafted of solid silver, its design seemed plucked from a medieval dark fantasy, precisely as Heinrich Himmler intended. On the front of each ring gleamed a skull and crossbones, the infamous Totenkopf emblem of the SS. This grinning death's head, with hollow eyes and bared teeth, formed the ring's sinister centerpiece. Encircling the skull was a wreath of oak leaves carved in relief around the band, an ancient Germanic symbol of strength, valor, and longevity. The overall impression was stark and foreboding, a reminder that the bearer was bonded to death and destiny at all times. Every detail of the ring's design carried meaning rooted in Germanic mysticism and Nazi ideology. To devise these arcane symbols, Himmler turned to an unlikely architect, Karl Maria Wiligut, an Austrian occultist and SS officer who became his spiritual advisor. Wiligut, sometimes dubbed Himmler's Rasputin, was steeped in esoteric lore. He claimed to possess secret ancestral knowledge of the ancient Germanic faith and took a keen interest in runes, mythic imagery, and occult practices. Under Wiligut's guidance, the SS honor ring was laden with deliberate symbolism meant to inspire the wearer and invoke supernatural virtues. Himmler believed that by adorning his knights with these potent symbols, he was forging a spiritual weapon as much as a physical award. Flanking the skull on each side were jagged lightning bolt runes, known as Sig runes. These twin Sig runes were the very symbol of the SS itself, representing the word Sieg, meaning victory. Enclosed in tiny triangular borders, the Sig runes were said to embody the life force of the sun and the conquering energy of the Aryan warrior. Their presence on the ring, bracketing the death's head, was a statement. The wearer was a harbinger of death and victory, carrying the sun's destructive power in one hand and the specter of mortality in the other. On one side of the ring, just below a Sig rune, lay a small hexagon framing a rune called Hegel. The Hegel rune, resembling a six-pointed star or snowflake, was rich in mystical connotation. In the occult philosophy espoused by Völkisch mystics like Guido von List, whom the SS admired, Hegel was the rune of cohesion, fate, and enclosure. It symbolized the unshakable unity and camaraderie idealized by the SS leaders. The esoteric meaning of Hegel was described as enclose the universe within yourself and you control the universe, implying that through self-discipline and faith, an SS man could master his own destiny and that of his people. For the ring bearer, the Hegel rune was a reminder of the spiritual armor he wore, the faith in his mission, and the unbreakable bond with his comrades in arms. Opposite the Hegel symbol, on the other side of the ring's band, another ancient sign was set, a crooked swastika standing on its point, framed within a square. The Hakenkreuz, or swastika, had been appropriated as the central emblem of the Nazi Party, but its roots lay in far older Indo-European traditions as a rune of good fortune, the sun, and the cycle of life. By placing a swastika on the honor ring, The SS reinforced their self-image as torchbearers of Aryan heritage and destiny. In the lore of the SS, this emblem wasn't merely Hitler's political logo. It was a rune of power and triumph. On the ring, it served as yet another charm for victory and light, twisted, though that light had become in a Nazi usage, subtly reminding the wearer that he fought under a cosmic symbol of supposed Aryan supremacy. Finally, on the rear inner part of the ring, beneath where the finger would rest, lay a more obscure set of characters, the so-called Heilzeichen, or salvation signs. These were not historical runes at all, but special creations by Wiligut and the SS designers. The motif appeared as a bind rune, an intertwining of several runic letters framed by a small circle. Wiligut's intent was to spell out a word, Gott, the German word for God, in archaic lettering. He did this by combining a Gibor rune, for G, with a hybrid rune that fused Os and Tyr, representing O and T. In essence, hidden within the ring was the word God, expressed in a mystical cipher. This is deeply revealing of Himmler's mindset. The SS liked to imagine itself as acting with the mandate of a higher power. By literally inscribing the concept of God into the ring, Wiligut and Himmler symbolically bestowed a divine sanction upon the SS man's duty.
An sich vermehrenden Geräusch, wie die fieberhafte Spannung zu wachsen beginnt. Die Männer und Frauen haben sich von ihren Plätzen erhoben. Der ganze Sportpalast gleicht einem wimmelnden Ameisenhaufen. Überall hören Sie schon Rufe der Begeisterung, der Zustimmung, Jubel und Heilgerufe. Es ist, als wenn dieser Sportpalast noch niemals in dieser Massenkundgebung sich zu Gesicht gebracht hätte.
It suggested that their mission was not just political or military, but spiritual, ordained by the very gods or god of their peculiar Aryan cosmology. All of these symbols, the skull, the oak leaves, the sig runes, the Hegel, the swastika, and the secret bind rune, together wove a tapestry of myth and meaning on the tiny surface of a ring. The design was painstakingly executed by master craftsmen. The task of producing the rings fell to the Otto and Carolina Gar family jewelers in Munich, a firm well known for catering to the Nazi elite's regalia needs. Early rings from the 1930s were slightly more slender in profile and featured a somewhat different skull design, whereas those made in the 1940s were thickened to a more robust build, perhaps to withstand the rigors of war, and the skull motif became more stylized. Each ring was approximately 90% pure silver. The manufacturing process involved casting the ring in two halves and then soldering them together seamlessly, with the skull motif separately cast and affixed to the top. On the interior of each band, the jewelers inscribed the personal details that made every ring unique. The recipient's surname was engraved, typically without initials, along with the date of presentation and a facsimile of Heinrich Himmler's signature. Preceding the name was a tiny engraving, SLB, an abbreviation of the German dedication Seinem Leben, which translates roughly to his beloved. Thus, on the inner side of an honor ring, one might read something like SLB, Müller, 21. Juni, 38, H. Himmler. With that inscription, Himmler's gift was personalized to the man. It was as if each ring came with a handwritten note from the Reichsführer himself, permanently etched in metal. The presentation of the ring was as carefully considered as its design. Each came nestled in an elegant presentation box, typically a black case adorned on the lid with the twin lightning bolt SS runes in silver. When an SS officer opened that box and first gazed upon the silver death's head glinting up at him, he would have understood immediately that this was no ordinary piece of jewelry. It was the distilled essence of the SS spirit, a fusion of ancient myth and modern fanaticism forged into a circle of precious metal. From that moment on, the ring would be his constant companion, wherever he went, be it an office in Berlin or a battlefield in distant lands. That skull emblazoned band around his finger would remind him of the oath he had taken, the brotherhood he belonged to, and the deadly power he wielded as one of Himmler's chosen. Receiving the SS honor ring was not a casual affair. It was steeped in ceremony and significance. Often, the SS timed ring awards to coincide with auspicious dates on the Nazi calendar, adding symbolic weight to the moment. On Adolf Hitler's birthday, April 20th, on the summer and winter solstices, June 21st and December 21st, or on November 9th, the anniversary of the 1923 Beer Hall Putsch, a hallowed day for Nazi old fighters, groups of SS men would be selected to receive their Totenkopf rings. Picture a gathering at the SS Junkerschule Bad Tölz on a bright spring day. Newly commissioned SS officers stand at rigid attention in their black uniforms and polished jackboots. It is April 20th, and as part of the Führer's birthday celebrations, an SS general moves down the line of graduates. One by one, he presents each young officer with a small black box emblazoned with twin silver runes. Inside, nestled on velvet, glints the skull-adorned ring. At a command, the men open their boxes in unison. The general, or perhaps Himmler's personal representative, reads aloud from a letter in an almost priestly cadence. In that solemn ceremony, whether held in a grand hall draped with swastika banners or on a parade ground under the open sky, each man lifts the cold silver band from its box and slides it onto the ring finger of his left hand. In doing so, he symbolically seals a lifelong pledge to Adolf Hitler, to the SS, and to the grim ideals the ring embodies. While many rings were conferred during formal ceremonies like this, others were awarded in the field or delivered through official channels under less ceremonious circumstances. Regardless of how the ring was physically handed over, every recipient received an accompanying letter from Heinrich Himmler himself. These letters, typed on elegant SS letterhead and bearing Himmler's signature in ink, framed the significance of the award in almost sacred terms. In the letter, Himmler welcomed the officer into the honored circle of ring bearers and reminded him of the grave responsibilities that came with it. One key passage explained the meaning of the ring's central emblem, the skull. According to Himmler's letter, the Totenkopf was a constant admonition to the wearer to be prepared at any moment to sacrifice his life for the life of the German nation and the Aryan community. Der Totenkopf ist die Mahnung, Himmler wrote, jederzeit bereit zu sein, das Leben unseres Ichs einzusetzen für das Leben der Gesamtheit. In English, the death's head is the reminder to always be ready to put our own life on the line for the life of the whole. With these words, he cast the ring as a symbol of self-sacrifice and unbreakable allegiance. The letter would typically also mention that the ring was a personal gift, an honor from the Reichsführer SS, not to be treated lightly or shown off for vanity. It reinforced that the ring bound the recipient to a select brotherhood within the SS. Many officers treasured these documents as much as the ring itself, often keeping the letters safe in a drawer or frame to be reread as a source of inspiration or indoctrination, as it were, throughout their careers. The act of placing the ring on one's finger often carried an almost mystical import for the men involved. SS members were instructed to wear the Totenkopf ring on the ring finger of the left hand, notably the same finger on which a wedding band is worn. This was no coincidence. In effect, an SS man was symbolically married to the order and its cause. ring was his matrimonial band to the SS's grim brotherhood. That symbolism was not lost on those who wore it. Many recipients took enormous pride in their rings from the day they first donned them. In group photographs of SS units from the late 1930s, senior officers often made a subtle point of displaying the left hand. One might see a commander resting his left hand conspicuously on his sword hilt, or a map, the silver skull ring plainly visible. It was a quiet, boastful signal to others in the know. Here stands a man favored by Himmler, a proven disciple of the SS creed. To those within the SS, the ring conferred a form of status that even high military decorations could not. It signified personal esteem from Himmler and inclusion in the quasi-mystical inner circle of the Schutzstaffel. There was strict etiquette and duty attached to the honor ring. Recipients were expected to never remove it except for the most pressing practical reasons. Certainly, day-to-day life in war could require temporarily taking it off. An SS tank commander might not wear his ring when performing maintenance on a hot engine for fear of losing or damaging it, for example. But the ethos was that the ring stays on through all ordeals. It was said that true SS men even kept their rings on when they slept. Losing the ring was considered a serious transgression or misfortune. If a ring was lost due to negligence, it could be seen as a mark against the officer's honor, and one can imagine the anxiety of an SS man who misplaced such a prized possession. If it was lost in the course of duty, say, in the chaos of combat, the man was expected to report the loss, and in some cases, a replacement might be issued after careful consideration. However, replacing an honor ring was not done lightly. The prevailing attitude was that a lost ring should be recovered, if at all possible, not casually substituted. If an SS member resigned, retired, or worse, was expelled in disgrace, his ring had to be returned to the SS headquarters. It was not his personal property to keep if he was no longer part of the order. In Himmler's eyes, the ring always remained the property of the SS. The bearer was merely its custodian, while he served honorably. There are records of a few men who were stripped of their rings when they fell out of favor or were found guilty of some breach of loyalty. To have the ring taken away was akin to being excommunicated from a sacred circle. Conversely, to willingly return the ring upon leaving was seen as the final act of a dutiful SS man. In either case, the returned rings would be sent back to Himmler's staff, often finding their way eventually to the same chest at Wewelsburg Castle, where the rings of the dead accumulated. In this way, even rings from the living who left the order were gathered back into the fold. So treasured was the Totenkopf ring among its bearers that some went to great lengths to preserve and protect it. There were instances of officers secretly commissioning local jewelers to make duplicate rings. Wearing an official SS honor ring was a privilege for life, but war brings many risks. A ring might be irreparably damaged in combat, or an officer might fear losing it on a dangerous mission. By having a replica, he could leave the original safely at home or at headquarters and wear the copy on the battlefield. If challenged, the ring would appear identical to the real thing. Unofficially, some high-ranking SS men condoned this practice for practical reasons, though it was against regulations to reproduce the ring. The existence of these copies only underscored how much these men valued the symbol, so much that they would bend rules to keep one on their hand at all times. Even after death, some SS widows were known to cling to their husbands' honor rings as keepsakes, defying instructions to return them, because the ring embodied their loved one's loyalty and sacrifice. Over the years of the Third Reich, the Totenkopf ring graced the hands of many of Nazi Germany's most notorious figures. Men like Reinhard Heydrich, The cold, brilliant deputy of the SS and chief of the Reich Security Main Office wore the silver skull on his finger, a mark of his intimate standing with Himmler. Himmler awarded Heinrich an honor ring early on, and it was reportedly returned after Heinrich's assassination in 1942. Likewise, heroes of the Waffen SS on the battlefield received their rings. For example, Michael Wittmann, the legendary tank commander credited with dozens of enemy tank kills, was awarded a Totenkopf ring after his string of battlefield successes. Whether bureaucrats of terror like Heinrich or frontline knights like Wittmann, the ring unified them as members of the same cult-like fellowship. Each time these men clenched a fist around a pistol grip or raised a hand in salute, the skull on their ring caught the light, a tiny, sinister observer to all their actions. The ring was there in moments of triumph and in moments of grim duty, from victory celebrations in plush Berlin offices to the firing squads on the Eastern Front. It became, in a way, a witness to the history the SS was writing in blood. The Totenkopf honor ring was present at strategy meetings and at scenes of atrocity alike, absorbing the aura of both honor, as the SS conceived it, and horror. Through it all, it remained a constant reminder to its wearer of who he was supposed to be, an unyielding warrior pledged to an uncompromising creed. The ethos behind the Totenkopf ring extended beyond the lives of its wearers. It bound them even in death. Heinrich Himmler conceived of the SS not merely as a fighting force, but as an eternal brotherhood, an order of knights whose bonds would transcend the grave. Nowhere was this more evident than in the fate of an SS honor ring when its bearer was killed. In 1938, Himmler issued a directive that was unique in military tradition. Upon the death of an SS man who held the honor ring, that ring must be retrieved and returned to the SS's spiritual home, Wewelsburg Castle. There, it would be kept in safekeeping as a memorial to the fallen and a symbol that the deceased officer was still, in spirit, part of the SS order. In Himmler's view, an SS man who died in service did not cease to be one of his knights, and the ring was a token of continued membership in the order of the death's head beyond mortal life. The fallen comrade remains one of us, was the message implicitly carried by this practice. The ring that had been bestowed as a mark of honor now became a relic of remembrance. On the battlefields of World War II, this practice took on a near religious urgency. When an SS officer fell in combat, his comrades were often quick to ensure his Totenkopf ring was removed and secured. Amid the mud, blood, and chaos after a battle, SS soldiers would form search parties with a singular mission: to find and collect the honor rings from their dead. It was not unusual for surviving officers to personally supervise the recovery, carefully sliding the ring off a slain friend's stiffening finger, sometimes even before rigor mortis set in. The ring, once retrieved, would be cleaned, wrapped, and sent back to headquarters with a note recording the bearer's name, rank, and date of death. In the ferocious fighting on the Eastern Front, where SS units like the Totenkopf Division took horrific losses, there were devoted efforts to salvage rings even as shells fell and enemies advanced. For the SS, leaving a fallen comrade's ring to be looted by the enemy or lost in the mud was almost a betrayal. They believed that as long as the ring could be brought home, a part of that SS man would live on with his brothers. Within the SS, some even whispered that the ring carried a piece of the wearer's soul. This quasi-spiritual belief held that retrieving a fallen brother's ring was not just about reclaiming a possession. It was about ensuring his spirit remained among the SS fellowship. Perhaps this was just comforting mythology, but it had practical effect. It motivated extraordinary efforts to rescue rings from corpse-strewn battlefields under fire. During the long retreat on the Eastern Front, there were instances in which SS men risked their lives under Soviet fire to pull a ring off a dead officer's hand. To them, leaving that skull ring behind would have been like leaving the man himself behind, something their sense of camaraderie and superstition could not accept. The recovered rings of the dead were meticulously shipped back to Germany, eventually making their way to Wewelsburg Castle in Westphalia. Wewelsburg, a 17th century triangular castle, which Himmler had appropriated in 1934, served as the ideological sanctum of the SS. It was here that Himmler established an almost monastic retreat for his highest officers and nurtured the occult and quasi-religious aspects of the SS ethos. Over the years, the castle's halls were decorated with runic symbols, sunwheel mosaics, and Teutonic imagery. Deep in the castle's lower levels, a circular crypt-like chamber was prepared, known as the Hall of the Dead, which Himmler intended as a shrine to honor the heroes of the SS, complete with an eternal flame and 12 pedestals for urns of cremated remains of SS leaders. In this very castle, the rings of dead SS men were collected and stored. They were placed in a special oak chest, reinforced with iron fittings, kept in a secure vault. Each ring, when it arrived, was a somber delivery. One can imagine an SS adjutant in a black uniform unlocking the heavy door of the vault by torchlight, opening the chest and adding another ring to the growing pile, murmuring a brief word of respect for the fallen before sealing the crypt again. As the war intensified and casualties mounted, the number of rings accumulating at Wewelsburg swelled dramatically. Each ring in that chest was a silent witness to a life cut short. By 1943 and 1944, news of battles like Kursk, Kharkov, and Normandy meant dozens, even hundreds of rings coming back in drips and drabs. The chest at Wewelsburg grew heavy with them. We can imagine a scene. An SS quartermaster stands in the dim vault, lifting the lid of the oak chest. Inside lies a trove of silver rings piled atop one another, their skulls and runes catching the flicker of torchlight. There is an eerie stillness as he gently stirs them, hundreds of tiny skull faces glinting up from the dark interior. Each one represents an SS officer who will march no more. Yet here, in this gathering of rings, they form a kind of phantom unit, preserved in symbolic form. By early 1945, the cache of rings at Wewelsburg was enormous, likely numbering in the thousands. In fact, it's estimated that by that point, well over half of all the honor rings ever issued had been returned due to their bearers' deaths in combat. The Brotherhood of the Death's Head was bleeding out, and the chest of rings was the ledger of that sacrifice. To Himmler and the inner SS leadership, this morbid treasury of rings was hallowed. These were seen as sacred relics of the order. In a sense, Wewelsburg Castle had become the holy crypt of the SS, and the rings were its relics, analogous to the bones of saints in a religious shrine. Himmler had plans, never fully realized, to eventually enshrine the names or ashes of the fallen alongside their rings in the castle, thus ensuring that future generations of SS would remember and honor them. He envisioned that after the war, SS leaders might descend into the Hall of the Dead, stand around a great circular stone table, and perform rituals to commune with the spirits of those who had died, symbolized by their rings and possibly their ashes housed there. This was the SS's twisted version of immortality. So long as the ring remained in the Order's possession, the man's soul was considered still part of the circle. The practice of reclaiming and storing the rings also had a practical dimension in the SS's view of honor. It denied the enemy a trophy and kept the symbol of the SS from being desecrated. The idea of Allied soldiers, or worse, Soviet troops picking over SS bodies and finding Totenkopf rings to pocket was abhorrent to Himmler. By retrieving the rings, the SS tried to ensure that no foe would wear or display their sacred emblem as a spoil of war. Indeed, when rings did occasionally fall into enemy hands, SS headquarters took note. For example, if a ring turned up in enemy propaganda or on the black market, it meant someone had failed to recover it. This only redoubled the commitment to gather every ring they could from the fallen. This morose fellowship of the ring only strengthened as the war situation grew more dire. SS men in the field derived a grim comfort from the practice. They knew that if they fell, at least their ring, and by extension a part of themselves, would be carried home and kept safe by their brothers. It was a promise the SS made to its own. Dein Ring kehrt heim, your ring returns home. Soldiers would sometimes speak of this quietly around campfires, pondering whether their ring would end up in that castle vault or remain on their hand to the end. In an organization that demanded they treat death casually, it was a way to humanize their own mortality, believing they'd be remembered, that they'd still be with their comrades symbolically. The brotherhood forged by the Totenkopf ring was thus not broken by death. It was, in a macabre way, cemented by it. Each new ring returned to Wewelsburg was both a tragedy and a validation. A tragedy for the life lost, a validation of the SS creed of loyalty unto death. The chest of rings became a kind of grim roll of honor. By war's end, one might say, the true elite SS unit was not any division at the front, but rather the silent company of rings, lying together in the dark crypt of Wewelsburg, an army of the dead assembled in silver. It is a haunting image, deep within an occult castle, removed from all sunlight and sound, thousands of little skulls, in a chest, quietly bear witness to the oaths kept, and lives expended for Himmler's nightmarish vision. The SS honor ring had been conceived as a mark of pride and unity, but the brutal reality of World War II put that bond to the ultimate test. By the middle years of the war, the Totenkopf ring was a common sight on the hands of SS officers at the front. It glinted on fingers in the deserts of North Africa, in the snowy fields of Russia, and in the dense forests of France. These men carried it into battle like a talisman. Some believed, half seriously, that the ring might bring them luck, or at least steal their courage. After all, what better reminder to embrace peril than a death's head grinning from one's own hand? But as the war raged on, fate was not kind to the wearers of the death's head. The tide turned against Nazi Germany, and more SS rings ended up slipping from dying fingers, either taken by comrades to be sent back to Wewelsburg or left behind in the scorched earth of distant battlefields. To Allied soldiers, the discovery of an SS honor ring on a prisoner or a corpse often provoked a strong reaction. The ring's skull and lightning design was unmistakable. This was no ordinary German soldier, but one of Himmler's black uniformed elite. Among Allied units, particularly on the Eastern Front, where feelings of vengeance ran hottest, finding a Totenkopf ring was like finding a serpent's fang. It identified an enemy who had shown fanatical zeal, and often those were the very men responsible for atrocities. Many Soviet troops, upon capturing an enemy, would instinctively check the hands for that telltale skull ring. If they found one, it could mean immediate and brutal retribution. The Red Army had little mercy for SS men. Countless stories tell of summary executions of captured SS, and a ring marked the wearer as such beyond any doubt. On the Western Front, British and American forces were generally more observant of the laws of war, but even they harbored a special disdain for the SS. An American intelligence bulletin circulated among frontline troops included an illustration of the SS honor ring, advising soldiers that if they found one, they had captured an SS big shot. There are indeed accounts from 1944 to 45 of Allied soldiers taking Totenkopf rings as grisly souvenirs. Some did so out of simple curiosity or trophy hunting. Others, perhaps, as tokens of justice, feeling that stripping the SS of their vaunted symbol was a small act of retribution. A British infantryman at Normandy described how, after a firefight, he pried a skull ring off the hand of a dead German officer, knowing full well it belonged to an SS man. He kept it as a pocket talisman until war's end, when he finally tossed it into the Rhine, saying he didn't want the damn thing anymore. Such anecdotes reveal how the ring's mystique extended even to those who tore it from lifeless fingers. First, it was a coveted prize, then an object that some felt uncomfortable holding on to. In one remarkable incident toward the end of the war, an American soldier involved in liberating a concentration camp encountered a captured SS guard who had tormented prisoners. As this guard was being processed, the GI noticed the silver skull ring on the man's hand. He forced the SS man to remove it and later handed it to one of the camp's former prisoners, a Jewish survivor, telling him, "Here, a present for you." In that moment, the power of the SS ring was inverted. What had been a symbol of authority and terror became a spoil of war, a personal token of justice in the hands of someone it was meant to oppress. The survivor reportedly kept that ring as a reminder of victory over his tormentors. Such stories, while not common, illustrate the potent emotional charge the Totenkopf ring carried. To the allies and victims of the Nazi regime, it epitomized the SS's arrogance and cruelty, and thus taking possession of one felt like a small triumph of good over evil. As Germany's situation grew desperate in 1945, even the most loyal SS officers began to see their once prized rings in a new, harsh light. What had been an honor was now a hazard. An SS man trying to slip away among retreating Wehrmacht soldiers or surrender discreetly to Allied forces had to make a fateful decision: to keep the ring and risk instant identification and likely violent retribution, or to discard it and sever that final link to his SS identity in hopes of survival. Many chose survival. In those chaotic final weeks of the war, Totenkopf rings were quietly pulled off fingers and tossed away in forests, fields, and rivers across Europe. Some were buried on the spot by men who couldn't quite bring themselves to destroy the symbol, yet dared not wear it. Others were hurled into lakes or ditches, their owners cursing the fate that had made such an emblem, once worn with swagger, into a death warrant. One former SS officer later recounted how, in April 1945, he and a comrade were fleeing westward ahead of the advancing Red Army. Realizing capture was imminent, they stopped in a wooded area. In grim silence, they removed their SS insignia, ripped off their rank patches, and finally, reluctantly, slid off their honor rings. They buried the rings under the moss at the base of a pine tree, perhaps muttering a farewell. Then they continued on, trying to blend in with regular army stragglers. Such scenes must have repeated countless times in that spring of defeat. Proud members of Hitler's elite forced to strip away their identity and abandon the very symbol of their devotion in order to save their skins. A great many rings simply vanished in the maelstrom of the Third Reich's collapse. Some were lost, along with their owners, on battlefields where no comrades remained to retrieve them. Bodies sunk in marshes or blown apart by artillery sometimes kept their rings forever, deep in the mud, undiscovered. Other rings were kept hidden by surviving SS men who decided to defy Himmler's mandate and hold on to their rings as personal keepsakes. These men, captured by the Allies after the surrender, often concealed their rings in their luggage or clothing, hoping they would not be found during searches. A number of such rings did slip through. Allied reports mentioned confiscating rings from POWs or finding them concealed in ingenious ways, like sewn into a boot heel or tucked inside a shaving kit. In some instances, an SS prisoner managed to keep his ring through internment and returned home with it, a ghost of his former life tucked away in his civilian pocket. By the end of the war in May 1945, it's estimated that roughly a third of all SS honor rings ever distributed were unaccounted for. Some of those were undoubtedly lying blast-buried in the rubble of Berlin or the craters of Ukraine. Others were sitting in Allied intelligence offices as curios or taken home by soldiers as war trophies. And quite a few were probably hiding in drawers and sock boxes of ex-SS men who had quietly kept them, despite orders to return them or the danger of being found with one. Even as this disintegration was happening on the individual level, a final directive from the top sealed the fate of the honor ring tradition. In October 1944, with Germany reeling under Allied offensives and material shortages growing acute, Himmler ordered the manufacture and awarding of SS rings to cease entirely. The Gar Jewelry Company in Munich halted production. No more rings would be cast from that date. The war had become too dire to justify silver and craftsmanship for ceremonial awards, and Himmler likely knew that new recipients might not live long enough to wear them. Thus, the pipeline of new rings was cut off. The rings already in circulation would be the last of their kind. The proud tradition that began in jubilation in the mid-1930s quietly ended in the gloom of late 1944 as the Reich crumbled. From that point on, the story of the SS honor ring became one not of bestowal, but of loss, concealment, and ultimately an attempt at wholesale disappearance as the Allies closed in. The final act of that drama was about to play out in the ruins of the Third Reich. As the Third Reich crumbled in the spring of 1945, Heinrich Himmler made one last effort to safeguard the physical legacy of his SS order, including the honor rings that symbolized its spirit. He knew that Allied armies were closing in on Germany's heartland from all sides. The thought of enemy troops overrunning Wewelsburg Castle and seizing the sacred objects of the SS, the honor rings, the SS standards, perhaps even Himmler's collections of arcane texts and artifacts, was intolerable to him. These items were imbued with too much ideological significance to be allowed to fall into foreign hands. And so in early 1945, as Nazi Germany's defeat became inevitable, Himmler issued a secret directive. All remaining SS honor rings under the organization's control were to be gathered and hidden away where the Allies could not find them. In the final days of March 1945, as American and British forces advanced into Western Germany, an SS convoy quietly departed Wewelsburg Castle under cover of darkness. Inside, a truck were crates filled with what is believed to be thousands of honor rings, the contents of the castle's memorial chest, and likely additional rings that had been returned from the fronts or were never issued. Only a handful of people knew the exact details of this operation. The convoy headed into the forested hills a few miles from the castle. The SS had previously scouted a location, an old limestone quarry or mine shaft carved into a hillside, secluded among tall pines. Under tense, hurried conditions, SS officers and engineers carried the heavy crates of rings into the mouth of the mine. The legend goes that they chose a spot deep inside the shaft and carefully arranged the boxes, then perhaps collapsed some earth over them or covered them with planks. Once the cache was in place, the SS men wired the entrance of the shaft with explosives. With a thunderous blast, they blew the tunnel, causing tons of rock and debris to crash down and seal off the hillside chamber. The explosion echoed across the valley, and then all was quiet again. In that hillside now lay the great hoard of Himmler's rings, approximately 11,500 of them, if later SS records are to be believed, entombed like the treasure of a lost dynasty. Perhaps in his desperation, Himmler imagined that one day the SS might rise again and reclaim these rings. Or perhaps it was purely an act of spite and secrecy. If the SS could not have victory, at least the Allies would not have this symbol of their order to display or desecrate. At the same time, Himmler ordered that Wewelsburg Castle itself should not fall intact into Allied hands. The castle, with all its occult trappings, was to be destroyed. Loyal SS personnel set charges throughout the building. On March 31, 1945, a series of explosions rocked the castle. Fires broke out and consumed much of the interior. The castle's north tower and outer walls survived, blackened and empty, but the chambers where SS ceremonies once took place were reduced to rubble. By the time American troops of the 3rd Armored Division arrived in the area in early April, they found a smoking ruin atop the hill. Villagers nearby recounted how SS men had blown it up just days before leaving. When Allied forces secured Wewelsburg, teams of U.S. Army intelligence and Allied investigators scoured the site. They were intrigued by what they found: peculiar symbols on the castle's floors and ceilings, charred remnants of a round table, and a circular crypt with strange acoustics. The Allies knew Wewelsburg had been important to Himmler, but the full extent of its role was only beginning to be understood. Amid the wreckage, they also made a curious discovery. In an underground storeroom hidden behind some stones were a few metal cash boxes containing SS paraphernalia. Inside were approximately 200 SS honor rings. Each was neatly labeled with a name and date, as if prepared for cataloging or storage. It's possible these rings were a small reserve that hadn't yet been moved to the main hoard. Perhaps rings collected from the dead in the final months that hadn't been added to the larger cache, or a handful kept aside for some reason. The Americans gathering up these rings may not have fully grasped their significance at first, but they certainly recognized them as Nazi regalia. The trove of 200 rings was shipped off for analysis, eventually becoming part of the evidence of SS culture. What the Allied searchers did not find, however, was any trace of the much larger collection rumored to exist. The main chest that had been at Wewelsburg was gone, and none of the SS prisoners captured in the area volunteered information about any burial of rings. The fate of the hidden rings quickly became shrouded in mystery. Allied intelligence officers interrogated high-ranking SS officers and staff from Wewelsburg after the war. Some of them spoke of an order to bury items, others feigned ignorance, or insisted any valuable cash had been destroyed. It's known that the Allies conducted some searches in the vicinity of the castle. Indeed, in the summer of 1945, British soldiers reportedly spent days probing the nearby hills with metal rods and explosives of their own, hoping to find concealed tunnels or bunkers. They uncovered a few small arms caches and bunkers with documents, but no mountain of rings. If they had detected the precise spot of the ring burial, they might have assumed it was just another collapsed ammunition dump and moved on. Over time, the whereabouts of the hoard, if it was not recovered in secret, faded into local lore. For Himmler, there was no chance to orchestrate anything further. By late April 1945, after Hitler's suicide, Himmler was a fugitive from the new German government and the Allies alike. Stripped of all power, he wandered north under a false identity. He no longer donned his fine-tailored SS uniform or the flashy ceremonial dagger. He wore the shabby standard field tunic of a low-ranking soldier. The transformation was so complete that when the British finally detained him on May 22, 1945, at a checkpoint near Bremervörde, they did not realize at first they had caught the infamous Reichsführer SS. During his brief captivity, as his identity became clear, British officers searched him thoroughly. There was no Totenkopf ring on Heinrich Himmler's hand. In all likelihood, he had discarded his own honor ring during his attempted escape, just as many of his men had. It would have been an obvious giveaway of who he was. Perhaps he buried it along a roadside or dropped it into a river as he crossed. In any case, within a day of capture, Himmler bit into a hidden cyanide capsule and killed himself, cheating the gallows of justice. Thus ended the life of the man who had conceived the SS honor ring. He died with no ceremony, no followers at his side. Only a British medical officer and a few guards in a small house watched him expire. The grand visions he had for the SS's eternal order died with him. In the days and weeks after, Allied forces overran the last redoubts of Nazi resistance. The war in Europe was over. The surviving fragments of the SS order were scattered to the winds. Men in POW camps, or on the run, secret files and treasures seized or hidden. The Totenkopf rings, once proudly worn and jealously guarded, were now mostly buried in the earth, locked away in evidence vaults, or gathering dust in the bottom of footlockers. Himmler's chest of rings, blast sealed in a hillside, remained undiscovered. The exact resting place of those 11,000 rings stayed known only to the dead, and perhaps one or two SS officers who never revealed it. In the ruins of Wewelsburg, Allied officers pondered the mentality that had created such artifacts. To them, the honor rings were a bizarre footnote to the war, a glimpse into the cultish inner life of the SS. They gathered a few for documentation and moved on to more pressing matters, like tracking down war criminals and securing far larger caches of looted gold and art. The Totenkopf ring had slipped into the shadows of history, along with so many other secrets of the Third Reich. In the decades after World War II, the honor rings that survived became eerie mementos of a defeated evil. Scattered across battlefields and continents, some found their way into museums, into private collections, or remained hidden away in dusty attics. To historians and the public, these rings are both fascinating and chilling, tangible links to the dark mystique of Himmler's elite. In the immediate post-war years, Allied soldiers who had picked up Totenkopf rings as trophies often kept them as curiosities or war souvenirs. But as time passed and the world confronted the full horrors of the Nazi regime, many veterans came to view these objects with unease. Some rings were donated to museums to serve as educational artifacts. Others were quietly discarded by their owners who no longer wanted to handle something that symbolized such darkness. Today, a number of original honor rings reside in museums around the world, where they are displayed as grim relics of Nazi Germany. For instance, the Imperial War Museum in London holds an SS Totenkopf ring, engraved with a recipient's name and the date, the 30th of June, 1934, a ring awarded on the very day of the Night of the Long Knives. Visitors can gaze at its tarnished skull and think about the bloody history tied to that object. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., similarly has on exhibit a death's head ring that was taken from a Nazi officer by a U.S. soldier and later given to a Holocaust survivor. Encased in glass, that ring now serves as a stark symbol of how the tools of oppression can be turned into memorials of liberation. In Germany, where displaying Nazi symbols is heavily restricted, a few honor rings are kept in state archives or used in scholarly research rather than public exhibition. But even tucked away, they attract interest from researchers trying to understand the ethos of the SS. Among private collectors of military memorabilia, an authentic SS Ehrenring is considered a highly sought-after prize, and one that comes with significant moral and legal baggage. Because so few rings escaped the war intact and outside of SS control, genuine ones are extremely rare. When they do surface for sale, they can fetch astonishing prices. Collectors have paid thousands of dollars or euros for confirmed originals, especially if they can be traced to a prominent SS figure, or if they come with documentation such as Himmler's award letter. An entire subfield of military expertise is devoted to these rings, distinguishing real ones from the many fakes. Indeed, the market is flooded with replicas and counterfeit honor rings. Some are well-intentioned reproductions for educational purposes or reenactors, often stamped clearly as copies. Others are nefarious forgeries, aged and crafted to fool buyers into paying a fortune for what they think is a real ring once worn by an SS officer. Experts examine the small details, the style of engraving, the silver content, the wear patterns, to determine authenticity. The Guard jeweler's original rings, for example, have certain hallmarks and idiosyncrasies that forgeries often miss. The existence of so many replicas today is testament to the enduring intrigue surrounding these rings. Part of that intrigue is fueled by popular culture. Over the years, the Totenkopf ring has appeared in numerous novels, documentaries, and even films as a symbol encapsulating Nazi occultism. To give one example, in adventure or thriller fiction, one might encounter a storyline where modern-day characters hunt for a lost cache of Himmler's rings, reflecting the real-world legend of the Wewelsburg Hoard. Documentaries on the History Channel or YouTube gather millions of views when they explore topics like Nazi occult relics, invariably highlighting the honor ring with its skull and runes as a prime example. The ring has thus taken on a life beyond its original context. It has become shorthand for the secretive, cult-like aspect of Nazi Germany in the public imagination. For families in Germany who discovered an honor ring among their heirlooms, after the war, the item was often a source of discomfort. In many cases, the widow or family of an SS man might quietly hand the ring over to authorities or a local church to dispose of, not wanting such a symbol in the house. Others simply hid them away, uncertain what to do. There are anecdotes of children or grandchildren only learning of a late relative's past when, while sorting through old belongings, they stumbled upon a small box containing a skull ring along with an aged letter bearing Himmler's signature. Such discoveries can be emotionally fraught. The ring, once a mark of honor to the recipient, now seen by descendants as a mark of shame or at least heavy history. Some families have chosen to donate these rings to archives or museums anonymously, preferring that the object be used to educate rather than kept as a morbid keepsake. On the darker side of the ring's post-war legacy, it has, unsurprisingly, been fetishized by neo-Nazis in some cases. Because the ring was never mass-produced for the general population and was intimately tied to the SS, wearing one today, even a replica, is a clear, if illegal, statement of neo-Nazi allegiance in countries like Germany or Austria. Police in those countries have occasionally broken up black markets, selling memorabilia where Totenkopf rings, often fake, were on offer to extremists. These groups view the ring as a powerful talisman, much as the SS did, except now it represents nostalgia for a hateful ideology. Fortunately, such incidences are relatively rare and fringe. For the vast majority, the ring's symbolism now serves as a warning, not a rallying cry. There are some collectors with no political views that want to collect such items as a stark reminder of World War II history. What happened to the great hoard of rings, allegedly buried near Wewelsburg? That question has tantalized treasure hunters and history buffs for decades. In the years immediately following the war, the area around the castle was off limits for a while, due to Allied occupation, and later because it fell under West German control, with ongoing demining and rebuilding efforts. By the 1960s and 70s, however, stories began to circulate among locals and treasure seekers that somewhere in those wooded hills lay a fortune in silver. Not coins or bullion, but Himmler's lost rings. Various expeditions were mounted, some in secret, others with permission. With metal detectors and ground-penetrating radar, searchers combed likely spots on the forested slopes. Now and then, rumors bubbled up that a few rings had been found, or that a tunnel had been located. But none of these claims have ever been verified with hard evidence or official findings. It remains possible that the bulk of those rings still lie exactly where Nazi engineers sealed them in 1945. If so, they might be buried so deep or under such a massive rock that only a major archaeological effort would extract them. It's also possible that at some point in the past, a highly discreet recovery was conducted, perhaps by locals immediately after the war or by secret services during the Cold War, and that the rings were melted down or otherwise disposed of without public knowledge. Given the value of silver and the desire to erase Nazi traces, it isn't unthinkable that someone might have quietly dug up 11,000 rings and never reported it. But as of today, the treasure of the Death's Head remains an enticing legend. Wewelsburg Castle has since been converted into a museum and youth hostel, and while it acknowledges the Nazi period in its exhibits, the whereabouts of the rings is presented as an unsolved piece of the story. Ultimately, only a haunting image remains, a circle of tarnished silver etched with a skull. Once, it rode proudly on the hand of an SS man who fancied himself a knight of a new order. Now it lies still, preserved behind glass, or buried in the cold earth, bearing witness to that order's downfall. The Totenkopf honor ring, in its silence, urges future generations to remember the cautionary tale it carries. A story of how fervor and fantasy were weaponized to serve cruelty, and how even the most vaunted symbols of an evil empire were destined to end up as mute relics in the aftermath of justice. Did you know that 97% of viewers are not subscribers? It can take weeks to research, edit, and narrate these videos. No AI here, but it only takes you 1 second to like and subscribe. Please do so, or you may never see us again. And for our next video, click right here. Thank you for watching.